Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Global COVID-19 Show, brought to you in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this important conversation around various aspects of the pandemic. Today is episode number 273, India Under COVID. And we're going to be going to India to talk to two folks who will help us understand what's happening on the ground. This show is co-sponsored today by SAJA, the South Asian Journalists Association, and will be joined a little later by John Lakshmi, who is one of the board members of SAJA and will be helping me ask questions. From India today, we have Vandana Menon, who's joining us from Hyderabad. She is a journalist and co-producer of this show. You've seen her many times from her work as we put the show together in New York, but she's in Hyderabad now. We'll also be joined by Vijayta Lalwani, who's a Scroll journalist covering the crisis in Delhi. She's at Vijayta L on Twitter. Please follow her. And we will give you a chance to meet our guests in just a minute. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we're sorry that we're going to have to talk on this very problematic issue of what's happening in India and the very worrisome issue. We want to get the facts on the ground from our reporter friends. If you haven't seen our show before, we've been on the air since the pandemic started in March of last year, and we've had more than 450 guests from 73 cities and 20 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. And we're able to do this because of our awesome producers, Vandana Menon, who you'll meet in a minute, and Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31. We are also able to do this because of my company that I've been honored to co-found, Digimentors. We put together conferences, summit, webinars, and talk shows like the one you're seeing now. And we are so grateful to everyone who supported us in our work. We are live right now on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Please hit share right now. Your friends can watch us live or later on any of those channels. So first, let me bring on Vandana so that she can say hello and set us up for the show today. So let me bring Vandana on right now. Hi, Vandana.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. It's so early for you. It's 6:30 in India. It's 9 p.m. here. Thank you for being here and for getting us Vijayta as well. Kind of set the scene for us, please, in India, and then we'll bring Vijayta
on. India is in the middle of a devastating second wave right now. As of yesterday, India crossed 400,000 daily cases and 3,500 deaths a day. It's been over 300,000 cases for the last week. And I believe the latest figure is that in the month of April, there were 6.9 million cases of COVID in India. It's just, we know India didn't have the most robust health system. But it's just devastating to see it absolutely collapse in the way that it is right now. And I think that's what makes it so hard to accept that it's 1 year on, and 1 year into the pandemic, and still we seem to be caught unprepared.
And that's part of what is, so many people asking questions about India seemed to have done so well, relatively speaking, until February or so. And so we want to answer the questions about what went wrong and how does India get out of this. So folks, please post your questions. Tell us where you're watching from, and we will bring your questions to our guests. You just met Vandana, who is reporting out of Hyderabad. And now we will go in a minute to New Delhi and meet Vijayta Lalwani. We're so grateful to her for being with us. And Vandana, I didn't ask you that question that I always ask, how is your family doing? I know you were separated from them for more than a year. It must have been wonderful to see them, but how are you holding up?
I'm glad to be home right now. It feels weird because I was in the US when the US was the epicenter of the pandemic, and a year later I'm back here. But I'm so happy to be back with my family. We're all safe, touch wood. Hyderabad, the situation in Hyderabad in the south of India is not as dire as it is in other parts of the country. I'm hoping it stays that way, but The Telangana government is also has massively been under-reporting cases. Our chief minister just recovered from COVID. So the situation here is, I think, on the rise.
All right. So let's now go to Delhi and bring Vijayta on with us. And we are, again, very grateful to her for getting up so early. So let's say hi. Hi, Vijayta.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Are you an early riser?
Usually, but not. I don't usually get up in the morning and wear makeup. That's the thing.
From my reporting days in India, I know that reporters, usually get to the office, say 10, 10:30,
Yeah.
11, and then we
Yeah.
go very late. So I'm especially grateful to you, especially in the middle of this crisis. So let me start by asking you, how are you doing? How's your family? And please tell us more.
So I'm doing fine. I live in Delhi alone. My family is kind of spread out. A bunch of them lives in Pune. It's in Maharashtra, and my parents, on the other hand, live in Nigeria. So we're quite spread out. And yeah, it's been really challenging, not just as a journalist, but also as as someone who's constantly trying to dodge the virus and protect themselves. We've really had to overcome a lot. We've had to, really push ourselves to ask a lot of questions. And yeah, well, here we are.
Yeah, and in terms of what have you seen in your reporting that you can share with us now?
Right. So last year, when the pandemic had just begun, um, and there was a nationwide lockdown that was in place. That time, I remember I had stepped out and I had co-reported a story with the executive editor of Scroll, Supriya Sharma, and we'd gone to a place where a bunch of migrant workers had been stranded, and they had been, they had set up, they were temporarily staying on the banks of the Yamuna. And I remember the story then was more about the humanitarian crisis that was unfolding, the hunger that was taking place, and just the arduous journeys that all of these people had to go through because of a decision that was announced, very suddenly, very randomly. Nobody was prepared for it. This year, the crisis is something else. It's a crisis of overwhelmed hospitals, of hospitals running out of beds, of hospitals going on Twitter to say that we just have oxygen worth a few hours, of the lack of infrastructure, of delays at multiple ends, and of the so-called biggest vaccination rollout that has not vaccinated the entire population. Only a percentage of it that includes your health workers and people above 45. So the questions we asked the last time and the questions we're asking this time are so stark, and that in itself kind of brings out the real picture of what's going on. You have cremations over cremations, mass cremations taking place in Delhi. I'm sure you've seen all of those really devastating pictures that serve as evidence. Not so much of the fact that these were people who died of COVID-19, but these were people who could not get treatment. They couldn't get treatment because of the fact that the hospitals were overwhelmed and we had shortages in beds. So that's what we're seeing this year, and the stories get more and more macabre each day.
Yeah. Just to add some context, last year on March 24th, India announced within 4 hours notice, India announced the world's strictest lockdown. And it saw a lot of migrant laborers traveling back to their hometowns from urban centers, and India kind of declared a premature victory over COVID. And then we saw now in retrospect, just carelessness. We saw very robust and electoral campaigns across multiple states. We saw a massive super spreader religious event, and we saw our leaders, the central government's leaders, kind of declaring victory over COVID and going abroad to talk about it. And so I think that's what makes it even more tragic, that really over the last year there's been no preparation for or no strengthening of the healthcare system. Vijayta, you did a story on the oxygen. Right now India's facing kind of a shortage of oxygen. There's an oxygen crisis. Oxygen seems to be the new currency, and it's absolutely devastating because you see people just doing their best to try and get oxygen. Vijayta, you did a story on oxygen plants and government tenders. Do you mind talking us through that?
Yeah, sure. So in October last year, the government, that is an autonomous body under the health ministry, had floated a tender to set up 162 PSA plants. Now, PSA plants are pressure swing absorption plants. They're oxygen generators, and they produce oxygen, from the air, and they produce oxygen liters per minute. So the tender was floated in October, months after the pandemic, began, months after the lockdown was imposed, and the contracts were awarded in December. Now, one plant each was to be set up across 162 district hospitals in India, and these plants, according to industry experts, these plants work great in far-flung areas where you can't exactly send really heavy oxygen tankers. So the contracts were awarded in December. A couple of vendors, at least three, as far as what we know, at least three vendors got the contracts to set up these plants. We made a bunch of phone calls. My colleague Arunab Saikia and I, we called over 60 hospitals, and what we found was that out of those 60, the plants had, the machine had reached only in 11 of them, or it had been installed, out of those 11. So a bunch of districts told us that, they've been waiting for the vendors to come and install the machine, or that the vendor ran away, or that the vendor isn't picking up their calls, a bunch of reasons, or that they had submitted a completion certificate. Each district hospital was supposed to submit a site readiness certificate, that, we have the site ready, we have a shed ready, we have a space available for the machine, and all that's left is for them to come and install it. So that's what we heard from districts. From a vendor that I spoke to, I heard that what was causing the delay at the end of the district hospitals was that they were yet to provide electricity and copper pipeline to connect the plant to the hospital. And honestly, it was just appalling to hear how such a crucial aspect of treating COVID-19 was delayed. Oxygen is an essential gas to treat COVID-19 patients. A lot of COVID-19 patients can be treated with oxygen. And these plants were supposed to be in some of the most far-off districts in India. So that's what we saw through our investigation, that there was an overall delay. And that the delay happened at a time when India was struggling for oxygen, where hospitals were literally going on Twitter to say that, to plead for oxygen, saying that we just have 6 hours worth, we have so and so many patients in the ICU. You had the Chief Minister of Delhi going onto Twitter and saying, the oxygen crisis is so serious, I request the center to help us. So it was really surprising to us as well, what we were seeing. And the investigation actually showed us that there had been a significant delay.
And Delhi has one of the best healthcare infrastructures in India right now. So, and this is the situation in Delhi. So I can't even imagine what it must be like in rural areas where there isn't as much of support. Yeah, it's just absolutely shattering, the kinds of stories that are coming across our Sree. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to tell folks who've just joined us, you're watching another episode of my show about COVID-19, and we're talking about India under COVID. India today set another world record, a tragic record of the number of new cases and daily deaths. But we also wanted to acknowledge the news today that the U.S. has put in motion a plan starting next week to ban most travel from India to the United States. And there's a carve out for U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and I presume some sort of essential workers of some kind. But that's the big news that happened here today. This might have come, Vandana, when you folks might have come out overnight. But I wonder if this is any attention is being paid to this news yet. Australia has also prevented Australians from returning to Australia from India. So have you had a chance to see this news yet?
No, but Australia has also got a 5-year prison sentence for people who violate this rule and go back to Australia. So that's quite strict.
So this is something that the Biden administration is putting into place starting next week. So many people are scrambling who need to return from India to the U.S. And of course, there's also starting in the summer, there'll be students who need to come to the U.S. So there's going to be a lot of attention being paid to this. Folks, we have questions and comments coming in from all over the world. So I'm just going to read some of those very quickly to you. Adil is watching from Copenhagen. Neil Parekh, one of our colleagues, is watching from Springfield, Virginia. And Jonathan Borstein, who's watched every one of our episodes, is watching from the East Village. Debbie Bernick is watching from Washington, D.C. Natasha from Montreal. And Paula says, a really important topic, thank you. Another colleague in Tallahassee, Florida. Peggy's watching from Taiwan. And we have a question that came up here for Vijayta about the mental health situation and what mental health fallout are you seeing on the ground for the medical personnel who are on the front lines of this crisis? A question from Farwa.
I can't imagine, it's beyond my imagination how exhausted health workers are at this point. And it's not just the fact that health workers are exhausted, but, we don't know if the number of health workers in India has increased or decreased, because of which there might be a lot of burden on the existing health workers. And we've heard doctors, we've read in several reports that doctors have spoken about just really how endless it is for them. And how they have to see death and despair on a daily basis. It's actually just beyond my imagination.
Not just that, there are patients or families of patients who've unfortunately passed away have also been using, have been kind of venting their frustration at healthcare workers. Fights break out. There's a lot of extra demand saying, why haven't you been able to help? It's just quite shattering. I saw a tweet from a reporter the other day whose mother has been ill with COVID, and she said, if you happen to be waiting in a hospital, please carry a bottle of water for a healthcare worker, because they'll need it. And I just thought that was
Hari, who's watching from Orlando, is saying that I know some parts of India have run out of vaccines, including in Mumbai. They had suspended vaccine delivery for at least 3 days. Can you tell us, Vijayta, what is your sense of how the vaccine program in India has had this trouble, considering there was a lot of buildup about how much vaccine capacity there was? India was giving away vaccines to other countries that need them. So can you put that in perspective for us?
Yeah. So what we've seen in the past couple of months is just, it's just unbelievable, actually. So our vaccine program started out with the government, rolling out vaccines only for senior citizens. That's people above the age of 60 and those with comorbidities. Later in the year, it was opened up for those above 45 years. Until then, there didn't seem to be any problems, except that there was a digital divide. I had done a report where I'd gone to one of the hospitals to see, if there are a lot of senior citizens, they're teaming up, not just from the middle class or the upper middle class, but also from working classes. What had been done to ensure that the vaccine reached everyone who fit into the category of 60 plus. Uh, and what I did witness was that there was a stark class divide emerging even in the vaccination rollout program. Because if you want to register for a vaccine in India, you have to register online. You have to go on the COVID portal. Then it'll give you an OTP, and whatever it may be. That a lot of people in India still don't have access to smartphones, or they're not very tech savvy. There is a very, very stark digital divide, and that has played out in the vaccination program as well. um, After that, the government declared that it would open up vaccinations for those above 18 on May 1st, and registrations opened on May 27th or 28th at 4 p.m. And a bunch of us went on the website to register, and the website crashed, as most of us expected. But then later on, there were a couple of technical glitches. Later on, we were able to register. But after we registered, there were no slots for people above 18 in any of the hospitals, at least in Delhi.
Same here in the
All,
south.
yeah, all of the hospitals that we saw showed slots only for those above 45. So that means that, and a bunch of states have actually come out to state that, you know, we won't entirely be opening up vaccinations from May 1st. We're going to go about it in a very phased manner. It'll take at least 3 months. I think the state of Telangana came out and said that they would open up in September. Like they've given a timeline to it. Yesterday, the Delhi chief minister said that it'll take them about 3 months, and he was urging citizens not to crowd at vaccination centers, and he was assuring everyone in a press conference that we'll make sure that everyone gets vaccinated, but please don't crowd any of the centers. It'll take us some time. It'll take us at least 3 months. I think Maharashtra has also said that they'll go about it in a phased manner, and so has Kerala. And a lot of these states have also, even before the central government declared that vaccinations would be open for 18 plus, a lot of these states were citing shortages in vaccines. There was a report in The Print, it's an online website, about how Chhattisgarh had ran out of vaccines for a whole day. Maharashtra has also repeatedly said that they're short of vaccines. A lot of senior citizens who have gone to these vaccination centers for their second dose of the shot have been turned away. So this is what we're seeing right now. We're like, as someone who's above 18, I'm kind of unsure of when I'm going to get the vaccine.
Yeah, same here. We had difficulty. I mean, we were able to register, but there are no vaccines available. And when my parents, for example, when they went to get their second dose, they went to a private hospital that only had 100 doses for the entire day that they were giving out on first come, first served basis. So they just happened to be lucky that they went early enough in the morning to be able to go to a private hospital as well. Because the additional issue, besides the vaccine hesitancy, is the difference in pricing that's come about now. So now, for at least from the 1st of May, central government was providing vaccines for free, but now Serum Institute, which is the license to produce the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine in India, called Covishield, is now selling the vaccine at different prices to the states and to the central government and to private hospitals. So now the additional issue is that it's going to be expensive for people who can't. It's going to be expensive, period, which it shouldn't be, because vaccines should be free.
So lots of people are asking how they can help, and Neil is putting in a link to United Way, which is collecting money in the US to give to United Ways in India, to the chapters in India. There are many other folks who are collecting money and giving it to efforts on the ground. Please be careful as you're, you might be getting inundated with such announcements, but please check reliable sources. And if you have any, please post them in the chat. We will share them with folks, as you can see that we're doing here. We have lots of questions, lots of comments. I want to say that I've been myself critical of India sharing the vaccine with other countries before it was able to serve its own people. But here's a comment from Bhutan saying, Pray for India. Yes, we gratefully received vaccines from India for the first dose. So, a country like Bhutan, which needs the help, this is where you're seeing that it's not an abstract thing. When India gives away the doses, it was going into the arms of people who do need it. But that still doesn't, fix the problem that India has and the vast numbers, the enormous numbers that are needed. And I'll just say another part of this is now the reports in America of Republicans, more than half of Republicans are saying they will not take the vaccine is so outrageous considering the shortage in India and elsewhere. So outrageous that that's happening right now. So, people are dying in India and other places to get the vaccine, and for Americans to take this for granted is horrible. Riaz is saying our thoughts and prayers are with India. Jan is asking, has India limited international travel of their citizens to other countries? I know their UAE and the UK, among other countries, have prevented Indians from traveling, but has India itself done anything with its travel programs? Do either of you know? Well, Vandana is saying no.
No, not to my knowledge. In fact, a good friend of mine had to go to London to do her field work, and just the second Boris Johnson said he was going to come to India, she knew India would go on the red list, and she booked a flight via New York to be able to make it out because she has to spend the next few months in the UK, and I believe her flight was packed with people trying to leave.
So coming to the US and then going, that of course will not be possible from next week. Radhika has a question from Montreal, I believe. Is there any possibility of mobile vaccination, or can the railways be used to carry out vaccination once the supply of vaccines is assured? Vijayta, do you know?
I think the possibilities of getting the vaccine to people are endless, but it's just the willingness of the government to do that. So far, we haven't even seen a very effective communication strategy from their end, to remove any kind of vaccine hesitancy, to get as many vaccines to people as possible. Sometimes it shocks me that this is the same country that conquered polio. We ran a really, really successful polio vaccine. I mean, of course, there's a difference because that was for children and this is for adults. But at the same time, India could have roped in its experience from back then and really pull through. The other thing I think I forgot to mention on the vaccine front was that was the relation between the center, that's the central government, and the state government. So in order to, so earlier actually, Bharat Biotech, that is manufacturing Covaxin, and Serum Institute of India, that's manufacturing AstraZeneca, that's also called Covishield here. They were selling the doses, at least Serum Institute of India was selling the doses to the center at 150 rupees per dose. Once the center announced that vaccinations would be open to 18 plus, it also said that the states were free to procure the vaccines on their own. And when the center announced this, Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech put out a press release giving out a different price rate for the same vaccines that they had sold to the center. So Serum Institute of India, that sold 150 rupees per dose to the center earlier, has now priced each dose at 400 rupees. And I think the price is around 600 rupees for a private hospital. The other day, the head of Serum Institute, Adar Poonawala, said that in a philanthropic gesture, he was reducing the amount from 400 rupees to 300 rupees, which I think is ridiculous. And the government, the center, that is, has not bargained with these companies. So now that the vaccinations have been open for 18 plus, the buck has entirely passed on to the states to procure the vaccines and also ensure that everyone gets it. It's a very complex situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the difference from last year as well. Last year, the central government made all of these decisions by itself. It imposed a national lockdown. But this time around, they seem to be passed back entirely to the states. And most states are trying to provide several states are trying to provide the vaccine for free, but that obviously means that they have to make budget cuts in other areas when they're already overburdened, trying to provide welfare for their state citizens. And it seems it's quite overwhelming that that a private company seems to be calling all of the shots. In fact, all of the information we're getting seems to be from Aadar Poonawalla, not from the central government. So, and there's a lot of confusion taking place there, and it's also playing into dirty politics, I think. The BJP government, which just ran an election campaign in West Bengal, said that if they come to power in West Bengal, they would provide the vaccines for free, which I think is just dirty politics.
And of course, the elections were part of the problem because there was lots of campaigning without masks. Natasha Arora has posted an excerpt from this very powerful essay by Arundhati Roy in The Guardian that anyone can search and find about that kind of shows the big picture of the profiteering that's happening, that's part of this problem as well. I want to bring onto our screen here John Laxmi from the South Asian Journalists Association. Saja is co-sponsoring our talk today, and John's coming here to ask a couple of questions. And John, thank you for being here and welcome. I know you have some thoughts and you also have some questions.
Thank you, Sree. Thanks to the journalists who are devoting time to this in the midst of your duties to cover this fast-paced news. A couple of questions from people in the U.S. and generally abroad, outside India. We are reading the news largely in the foreign press, either the British or BBC or the American press, and we are getting a certain sense of what the conditions are in India, and I'm sure you have been reading those reports as well. I would like to know, from your point of view, are we getting it right? Is the foreign press getting the magnitude of the problem as well as the facts on the ground reasonably well? Or is there a discordance between your view and the way you are reporting it there versus the way the whole story is being presented in the foreign press?
Vijayta?
Yeah, I think the foreign press is getting it right.
Yeah.
I do think that the foreign press is getting it right. And I do think that they're trying to amplify the work that a lot of independent press in India is trying to do.
So, I have a follow-up then.
Yeah.
One of the follow-ups is much of the reporting is about the real day-to-day hardships faced by patients, doctors, frontline workers, and all of that. And that's a micro-level story of individual hardships, people dying and all of that. The macro picture is important, equally important. And there's some questions raised on whether the entire press all over the world has got it right, not only in India, but even in other countries. If you read the Wall Street Journal's op-ed today here, Holman Jenkins has written a column questioning about the overall portrayal of the picture. One of the things, for example, that troubles me, I have a financial background, I have a statistical background. And if we look at the statistics of the total number of cases in India and the total number of deaths in India, the total number of deaths in the USA, total number of cases in the USA on a per capita basis, even including the second wave and the deaths from there and the number of cases there, it shows, based on Johns Hopkins University data, for example, the overall percentage of cases per million population as well as deaths per cases are much lower in India. And of course, there have been a lot of explanation given by medical professionals and others on the population of India being younger, perhaps they have better immunity. Several reasons have been given. And it looks like the Wall Street Journal op-ed today is raising this overall question about whether journalists are getting the macro picture right. Is this going to end reasonably satisfactorily with all the mobilization of all the help internationally, or is it going to be a major catastrophe that is getting out of control? Do you have a sense of the macro statistics?
So you pointed to this the comparison between the numbers in the US and the numbers in India. What I would like to add to that is a very strong caveat that there is a serious undercounting of cases and deaths in India. That's a very, very strong caveat that needs to be added and that needs to be taken into consideration. A lot of researchers and epidemiologists have been going on and on and on in India about how we need better data, because that will help them to make better projections, more accurate projections.
So
And
what are the sources of data in India? What do you all rely on? You don't trust the government.
We do rely on the data that each state gives through their state bulletins every day. That data gets fed into the Union Health Ministry's COVID dashboard. That's what we usually cite on a daily basis. But we also know that there's an undercounting because the number of deaths recorded by the crematoriums, the number of deaths recorded by the civic bodies, at least I'm talking about Delhi, and the number of deaths recorded by the hospitals and the states, there's a big difference. There's a huge undercounting. And we should definitely add that caveat needs to be added.
And here are some comments coming in. John, 1 second. Some comments coming. Jacqueline says that we're still at the peak, and so we're just, there's an iceberg phenomenon. Anusha says rural deaths are not being reported in certain states, which is an issue as well. I just want to share this note from Barkha Cardoz, who says this is just so heartbreaking. Barkha's husband, Floyd Cardoz, passed away in March of 2020, the famed chef here in New York and India, whose death was at such a young age was shocking, but also kind of brought alive the dangers for a lot of us who were, not paying enough attention. When I still remember the moment when I heard that Floyd had passed. Barkha, thank you for watching with us today. And Barkha says that there are people in India that are dying at home, and those aren't being accounted.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Debbie says we should all donate in honor of the Indian American doctors who have helped defeat COVID in the US. And Fernando in LA says the situation in India is troubling, really troubling. He's terribly troubling. And Romualdo says, my heart is crying for my India, love from Arizona. So with people watching from around the world, thank you for being here. We have two fabulous journalists in India who are with us, Vandana Menon in Hyderabad, and we have Vijayta Lalwani in Delhi, and John Laxmi from SAJA, which is co-sponsoring this, the South Asian Journalists Association, is also here with us. Vandana, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, the other issue is that the health system is so overwhelmed that negative COVID tests aren't coming, or positive COVID tests aren't coming in time. So people are getting tested, and then suddenly their oxygen levels are dropping. They need to be admitted, and then if they pass away and the test hasn't come back in time, that the death isn't counted as a COVID death. Similarly, that we're seeing, people are being forced to share hospital beds. There are just no resources available. So people who need dialysis, for example, and regular healthcare services are not being able to access that, and they're also dying. That's not going to be counted as a COVID death, but it is related to the lack of resources. So it's just a massive discrepancy there. And you can look at the obituaries in the paper as well. It's just official data will say 0 deaths or 3 deaths, but you have 4-5 pages in the newspapers just obituaries. And it's just like even the video evidence that we're seeing from wonderful ground reporters, it just doesn't match up. I think now it's gone beyond the numbers. It's just the massive heartbreak and pain that we're seeing on a daily basis. It's just, and it's disappointing. That's what it is. It's disappointing that it came to this, that this is even happening.
And we have Paulo asking, what's the American government giving to India? From what I read, there's going to be I think I read 20 million doses of vaccines going to India, AstraZeneca. That's already
Yes.
in India.
And yesterday, the first batch of aid landed. I think it was N95 masks, and I'm not sure, but remdesivir vials. I think that's part of the first aid package that we're seeing. And there's also been a lot of that international funding that's coming into, for example. Before the last month, I didn't even know what an oxygen concentrator was, but now that's become such an important thing. There's so much funding that's going into the manufacturing of cheap and easily accessible oxygen concentrators, because that's the issue. Vijayta, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe based on your reporting, it's not that we have a shortage of oxygen, it's that there's difficulty in transporting and storing oxygen that's happening.
Actually, it's both. But I think Mr. Lakshmi had to say something. Did you want to add something?
Go ahead. I have a question, but go ahead. Finish the thought.
Okay. So it's a bit of both, actually. Around last year, when I spoke to a bunch of oxygen manufacturers, they were saying, we don't have any issues. We're producing a surplus. We'll be able to meet the demand. This year, it's like, okay, the demand is way more than our production capacities. So actually, the central government has floated a tender for the import of 50,000 metric tons of oxygen from abroad. And my colleague Arunabh Saikia had worked on a report where he found out that our oxygen stocks are depleting because our demand is way over our capacity, and our demand is only rising because we're recording such a high number of cases every day. So it's not, and there is, of course, a transportation issue as well. So, for instance, you need massive tankers to transport oxygen between different states. And there were a couple of reports that officials from different states were barring the transportation of the tanker into Delhi. We heard that from UP, and that was happening in Haryana as well. And now oxygen tankers that are being driven across states have a police escort with them. Aside from this, there's also been issue with having enough cryogenic tankers. So the government has proposed converting nitrogen and I think argon tankers for the use of containing medical oxygen. So it's both. We are also running out of stocks, and we are also struggling to transport them in time.
There's a question here from Rajiv Yadav. How do you even begin to trust the government when the ruling party says there is no shortage of oxygen cylinders? And we're seeing comments even here about shortages of oxygen cylinders. So Vijayta, how are you covering that, and how do you tell that story?
We tell that story through the people who are standing in lines, waiting to get their cylinders refilled. We've seen countless number of videos. We've seen countless number of pictures of people really just, they're not even standing in line. They're putting their cylinders there and they're going and, sitting it out somewhere else. There have been enough reports of this. And it's through the people that we get what the real sense of it is.
And
actually, I have a follow-up on that question.
Yes.
All the reports are pointing out the things that are not happening right, all the shortages and so forth. Both my wife and I come from very large families. We have very large number of relatives and friends in India, and the information on what is available and where to go and get it and when it's available. What kind of a role is Scroll and other television stations able to play? Because everybody seems to be relying on WhatsApp forwards on what's available, what's not available. Are you able to, as journalists or as media organizations, local television stations, able to provide to people where things are available, not just that they are not available, but where to go?
Yeah. I think more than media organizations at this point, social media has played a huge role in providing information to people about what's available, where can we go, because there is no central system that we can rely on. There is no system run by either like a state government or the central government that provides us, real-time accurate information about where we can go to purchase remdesivir vials, where we can go to, get an oxygen cylinder, etc. So everybody at this point is kind of relying on social media, and most of the time, some of the information might just turn out to be redundant as well. Because if you call on those numbers, the people will say, "Oh, we don't have it, we've run out," or they don't pick up your calls at all. In some states, I do believe that they have, helplines and war rooms dedicated to this. But on the whole, it seems that social media is serving everyone's purpose. Even if they need an ICU bed, they're tweeting about it, tweeting that they
Even
need it.
even hospitals' purposes. Fortis Hospital, a large private hospital in Delhi, put out a tweet saying we need oxygen. That seems to be the situation right now.
Here's
Yeah.
a comment. Jerome says, "Does WHO helping Indians at this moment? Are they helping?" Anusha says, "WHO has labs as experts in the labs and in the field. They cannot force the GOI. They can only urge, cannot directly help people," is what she says about WHO. And Manalini is asking, "I'd like to donate. In your opinion, which organizations have you seen really jumping in to help?" So I want to see if our guests have any suggestions. I know on the front page of saja.org, they have posted links to vetted organizations that can collect money in the US and go to local organizations in India. Vandana, thought on that?
Yeah, there's so many fundraisers happening. Hemkund Foundation is raising money for oxygen cylinders, I think they're doing lots of wonderful work. There are also NGOs have also been putting out verified handles for people who need personal help with their medical bills. Personally, I've been trying to donate to people who need, because now the other issue that we're seeing is that the cost of bills have just skyrocketed from the cost of an ambulance to medicines to even crematoriums where you have to pay for their services. It's just gotten so much more expensive. So I would recommend maybe donating to people's private bills.
Okay. Folks, we only have a few minutes left. You're watching a conversation where John and I are in the US, Vandana and Vijayta are in India, and we're talking about India under COVID. Please tag or share right now with a friend. They can watch this live or later. This show will air as soon as we're done, again on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. Lots of comments and questions coming in. Ram is pointing out covidresourceindia.com where they're posting stuff, and Radhika is mentioning a place where they are supporting. Ravi says that there are also some fake vaccines and issues like that. So can you, Vijayta, in terms of reinfections or people getting infected after getting the vaccine, can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I think that there needs to be a certain awareness that even if you do get the vaccine, your first dose, and even after your second dose, you can still get the infection. I think a lot of doctors have and public health experts have tried to stress on this, that there's still a possibility for you to get COVID-19, but your infection would not be as severe as it might have been without the vaccine. Regarding fake vaccines, I'm not entirely sure. There was chatter among some people that they thought that they had received a placebo, but honestly, I really don't know much about that.
One of the other issues with the AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine was the length between doses. That changed. The official communication from the central government changed. Initially, it was 4 weeks, whereas in the UK, where the trials were held, the UK recommends a 12-week gap. The central government, I think towards the end of March or the beginning of April, said actually we should increase the dose, the time between doses to 6 to 8 weeks. So there's been a lot of confusion around that. I believe the efficacy kind of reduces if the doses are closer, but at the same time, many people preempted the vaccine shortage and wanted to go ahead and get their second dose. So there's just a lot of confusion. The other thing I wanted to quickly point out, and this is another report that Vijayta was working on, is the Central Vista project. There is money. The Indian government does have money. It just seems to be misallocated at this point in time, and there's also seems to be a lot of resistance from state governments that want to kind of maintain the image that the COVID situation isn't actually as bad. So I wanted to ask you about that work, Vijayta.
Yeah. So the Central Vista is a very crucial stretch in the heart of Delhi. It starts at the India Gate, and then it's a 3.2 kilometer stretch. It was built by the British when they moved their capital, while India was a colony. They moved their capital from Calcutta to Delhi, and this was built in the 30s. It came up in the 30s. And it has some very historic buildings like the Parliament, the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and a couple of blocks called the North Block and the South Block that house, all our ministries and their offices. So the Central Vista project is the project to redevelop and renovate that stretch, and also get a new Parliament building right behind the old one, and new buildings that would come up in place of older buildings. So, for instance, there's a building called the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, IGNCA. I might not be saying, I might not know the full form correctly, but it's called IGNCA, and in all likelihood, that would be demolished in order to house new buildings, to house new ministries, to house the offices of ministries. So what I did find out when I went there, I was just curious to know that if this project is still going on, because this project has been dubbed as a vanity project by the critics of this government. So I went there to find out if work was still going on, and yes, and Delhi is currently still under a lockdown, and work is still continuing out there. And correspondence that I was able to access showed that this project has special permission to continue as an essential service. It has permissions from the police, it has permissions from the Public Works Department. The work is on in full swing. And even the workers over there told me that the work will not stop here. And it costs 20,000 crores. That's an unimaginable
$3 billion, around $3 billion.
Yeah, well, I also want to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying in comparison, the 162 oxygen plants that were supposed to be set up, those just cost 201 crore. Such a measly and meager amount compared to 20,000 crore.
One thing I also want to just note in the few minutes we have left is that more than 155 journalists have died from COVID-19, and obviously so many other professions have also been affected, but journalists are on the ground covering this and are often criticized by certain sections of society for highlighting problems and things like that. You see that on Twitter. So that's another added element here, and so we're so grateful to the journalists for all the great work we're doing. We only have a couple of minutes left. John, do you have another question or comment, and then we'll go around the table?
No, I just wanted to say that you and I are in the United States, and I know that your heart and my heart are now with the Indians. And this particular crisis, I think, for the first time, is now bringing the Indian diaspora much more connected back to provide relief efforts to the people in India. We used to say that the Chinese and others do much more, the diaspora does much more for their native countries, but now I think we are finding that this crisis is now bringing a lot of Indian diaspora to go back and connect and provide the relief. I'm sure they will get through it, and I wish the young journalists and all the journalists who must be really working very, very hard. All the best. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you. And John, can you just remind us of where they can go to get information about donations?
Yes, at www.saja.org, we have a list of people, a list of organizations that are collecting charitable donations for India relief. And Saja itself is a non-profit organization, by the way, and you can donate to Saja, and that's what makes these types of events possible. And there's a donate button at our website, and all donations are welcome. $5, $50, whatever people can afford. And Sree has founded this organization, and thanks to his help and others, the organization is doing very good work, and we would like to connect more with the journalists in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Nepal and all the South Asian countries more and more. It's tragic that we have to do this at a juncture like this, but hopefully we'll also do this to celebrate good things.
Absolutely. John, thank you very much. And thank you to our friends at Saja. Please, everyone, follow Saja HQ on Twitter. And John is at John Laxmi. Thank you very much, John. Vandana, let's go to you for some final thoughts.
I think the way the central government is handling this is absolutely shameful. Please continue putting pressure on them, because if there's one thing that gets to them, it is international criticism. Please keep donating, and yeah, stay safe.
Okay, thank you. And Vijayta, thank you so much for getting up so early in the morning and joining us here. Your thoughts for now.
Well, my final thoughts are for people everywhere to support the free and independent press in India. It's because of the work that we do that the foreign press is able to pick that up and amplify it. So I would really, really urge everyone to, subscribe to Free Press, subscribe to Scroll, subscribe to News Laundry. It's another portal, The Wire, The Quint. There are a bunch of portals out there that you can subscribe to and contribute to. Scroll has a ground reporting fund. So I would urge people to really support the independent press in India so that they can continue to be getting, accurate reports that reflect the truth.
Thank you. And you can find Vijayta's reporting on Scroll.in. And also, please follow her. She had a heartbreaking Twitter thread about just the crematoria near her home in Delhi. She's Vijayta L on Twitter. So thank you very much, Vijayta. I hope you will get some rest before you go out and report again today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And big thanks to Vandana for joining us as well, and to Rose, our producer. A couple of quick announcements. We will be back on Sunday with our friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian will be doing another episode of their show She's on Call this coming Sunday. Please join us on all social media channels. We'll also be doing the New York Times read along, where we read the New York Times out loud, the print newspaper, with Neil Parekh. Please join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday. And then my flagship event, Social Media Weekend, is coming up on May 21 and 22. Online, fully virtual. Anybody in the world can join us. So please, I hope you will do that. We're very excited. Brian Stelter has just been confirmed as one of our speakers from CNN Reliable Sources. This is the conference to attend if you want to learn all about digital and social media. You can go to smwknd.com. And with that, we'll say thank you very much, everyone. Please connect with me. I'm at Sree on Twitter. Would love to hear your feedback. Sree@sree.net is my email. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll say goodbye.